Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Zimbabwe is a failed state. I've said this many times, and I'll say it again. Zimbabwe is a failed state. We are now 44 years after independence, and we have yet to hold free, fair, and credible elections. This is at the heart of why we are a failed state. One has got to ask, yes, we accept we have got a Zanu PF dictatorship. But in the 44 years, are we saying we never had the opportunity to end the dictatorship? It's good enough. It's not good enough to say we've got a dictatorship. We have accepted that. I mean, are we saying it has taken us 44 years to finally realize we've got a dictatorship? Of course not. We realize that we have got a Zanu PF dictatorship by the mid-1990s. This is why the people were calling for democratic change. When you've got a dictatorship, it's no different from when we had white colonial rule. The question then arose that how are we going to end the oppression, the white oppression? Before independence, the decision was made to have an armed struggle. But when we gained our independence in 1980, by the mid-1990s, the people realized that they were stuck with the Zanu PF dictatorship. There's no denying it. The question then was, how are we going to end Zanu PF dictatorship? The national consensus was that we should risk life and limb and livelihoods to elect opposition members whose number one task would be to implement democratic change so that we've got free, fair, and credible elections. Morgan Tsvangirai and his friends launched their party in 1999, and they called it the Movement for Democratic Change, riding on the wave of the popular sentiment calling for democratic change. It's now 24 years down the line. One has got to ask, why is it that Zanu PF is still able to rig elections? We all agree that last year Zanu PF blatantly rigged the elections. Why is it that Zanu PF is still able to rig elections? This is why it comes back to we have got to look at the opposition. There is no doubt that the opposition, the MDC, CCC, have turned out to be breathtakingly incompetent and corrupt. It's just that many people out there, many Zimbabweans out there, have not opened their eyes to see it. And those who have seen it, they will not admit it even to themselves. That is the tragedy with Zimbabwe. I've got here a video of Margaret Longo talking about that very issue. Opposition corrupt, and incompetent. Just listen to it.
They look at it as a business seriously, because the moment they go, business and employment creation, because if they go to parliament, you are employed, you get a car, you get a stable salary, and you are paid until your term is over. Already you are employed. If you are out, you're out of employment.
If you serve 2 terms, you get a pension?
You get a pension. Then already, this is why people kill in politics. They kill to be in parliament. This is why we have violence in this country, because there is no employment. The only employment which is there is in politics. There is no other outside employment. So for them, a very good example is, look at what happened to CCC, the Triple C party. Have a look. When they lost, when they said they were rigged, what I expected from them, I expected all parliamentarians to say, we are not going to go to participate in a rigged system, and we are not going to sit in a rigged parliament, because the elections have been rigged. So all of us were not going to parliament. Imagine what could have happened. We could have gone into new elections. There's no way Zanu PF was going to roll alone.
You think so?
Yes.
Do they care?
Caring or not caring, the public would have forced them, because the majority of the people would want representation in parliament.
There it is. What she is saying there is something that we've all known, or should have known all along. I have often screened on this platform Tendai Biti and David Coulthard. As far back as 2013, Tendai Biti 2015 admitted that the election process in Zimbabwe is flawed. And there is absolutely no point in participating in those flawed elections. And yet, they've continued to do so. Here is a quotation from David Coulthard's book. The full quotation is being shown at the bottom of the screen. In that quotation, 2013 electoral process was so flawed, so illegal, that the only logical step was to withdraw. This is David Coulthard. Then he explains why he and his friends did not withdraw. They were competing in those elections as MDCN and MDCT. Neither side could trust the other one to withdraw, because they realized if the other side participate, they will win those gravity seats. And they could not stomach that. And so they participated in flawed electoral processes, which they knew were flawed, which they knew by participating, they're giving Zanu PF, or the process itself, to Coulthard, the process credibility, and therefore then Zanu PF giving Zanu PF legitimacy. But they continued to participate out of greed. That is at the heart of the problem here. And Margaret Longo is saying the same thing here. The MDC, CCC leaders last year, even when SADC in the AU election observer mission report made it abundantly clear that the process was flawed and illegal, they still went on to take on their seats. Zanu PF has been dangling that carrot, knowing fully well that as long as they're able to entice them to participate and they participate in their numbers, it will give the process credibility. It will give Zanu PF legitimacy. Why sorry about that. Some technical problems there. Why we continue not to see it is at our own peril. This circus that has been going on in Zimbabwe, we should realize that the only way to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections is by implementing reforms or having a war. We have chosen to implement reforms. After 24 years, we have got to accept that the people we tasked to implement reforms have let us down. They failed to implement any reforms. Why are we hesitant? We seem to be incapable of making up our minds that these guys have failed. Why? They have failed. And this pretense that CCC is going to will be our savior. Nelson Chamisa will be our savior, even after repeated cases where he has failed the nation, is at the heart of our problem here. Whether we like it or not, Chamisa has proven, and these MDC CCC friends have proven to be breathtakingly incompetent and corrupt. And the sooner we can swallow that reality, the better. Here is a video clip of Chamisa being taken to task by BBC on a case that beggars belief. He was caught in this particular case denying he lied, and then he was denying that he lied. Just listen to that.
Ende patakasangana na Trump akatibvunza naye akomana mari yamuri kuda kuti nyika ifambe imari.
Serious questions were raised about your behaviour in Washington, D.C. You did see some senior people on Capitol Hill, some Congress people, but you also claimed that you'd seen Donald Trump. You claimed you had a conversation with him in which you said he asked you how much you needed to move the country forward. You told him $15 billion, and he said to you that he would provide the money if you won the election. That was not true, was it?
Sangana na Trump akatibvunza naye akomana.
It was not true that you'd seen Donald Trump and that Donald Trump indicated to you that he would provide, if you won the election, but $15 billion.
All those statements were said by other people, not what I said.
Trump mari yamuri kuda kuti nyika ifambe imari.
Well, no, because there is a video which shows you at a rally in January back home in Zimbabwe saying that Donald Trump had pretty much promised you $15 billion. To be clear, because some people in Zimbabwe are still confused, you're now telling me you did not meet Donald Trump.
We did not.
This is the reality of our politics. The lie that BBC was referring to was in 2018. In that election, Chamisa also promised the people of Zimbabwe that MDC alliance was going to win those elections because the party has stringent measures to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. He was lying. Of course he was lying. Zanu PF went on to rig the 2018 elections. Five years later, 2023, he repeated another lie. This time he was telling the people of Zimbabwe that I have plugged all the vote rigging loopholes to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. Again, he was lying. At the present moment, the country is going through what one can only call Zanu PF turning Zimbabwe into a North Korea police state. Fadzayi Mahere, one of Chamisa's followers, fellow leaders, posted what we can see there on the screen. A photograph of the army, an article in which she was saying, can someone please tell them we don't want war? By Fadzayi Mahere. If this was coming from anybody else, I would accept it. But coming from people like her and their fellow CCC leaders, this is sheer hypocrisy. Fadzayi Mahere participated in last year's elections, knowing fully well the process is flawed, knowing fully well that by participating, it will give Zanu PF legitimacy. But she participated out of greed. She didn't care that Zanu PF would rig the elections, win them, and perpetuate the people's suffering. She didn't care about that. All she wanted was a share of the spoils of power. Even when SADC report condemned those elections, she and her fellow CCC members went on to take their gravity seats out of greed. She wasn't able to hang on to a seat because of the factional war that broke out within the party, CCC. And she was, unfortunately for her, on the losing faction. But what I can tell you now is that she is still actively involved in politics. She is condemning Zanu PF's deployment, the security clampdown, not because she doesn't want the dictatorship to continue. She just wants to keep herself in the public eye. Come 2028, Fadzayi Mahere, Nelson Chamisa, and all the other CCC leaders will participate in the 2028 elections without even one token reform implemented out of greed. This is the problem we have in Zimbabwe. We had the opportunity, many opportunities, to end this Zanu PF dictatorship. I believe the nation chose the right course by saying we must elect opposition members who will implement the reforms. The alternative was to have another war. The opportunity to end the dictatorship was there. The only problem is we did not have competent opposition to implement the reforms. That has been at the heart of our problem here. And people like here would want to give the impression that they care about the nation, when in reality they don't. And we really need to wake up and open our eyes if we are ever going to end this madness. In closing, I'll just play a video clip of Dr. Neves Mumba, who was the chairperson of the SADC election observer team. Last year. And in this video, he is emphasizing once again the need for Zimbabweans to implement the democratic reforms so that 2028 elections are free, fair, and credible.
Well, thank you so much. First of all, let me be clear that the changing of any dynamic or situation in any of our African countries is a preserve of the citizens of that country, in this case, the Zimbabwean people. An election observation team goes there to support the process by observing and being able to release a statement of our observations that, for instance, in Zimbabwe, we raised several issues of transparency and also the independence of the Electoral Commission and things which happen in many other countries, you know. But at the end of the day, once we produce the report and make it available to the Zimbabwean authorities and eventually to the Zimbabwean people, it really remains the preserve of the Zimbabwean people to fight for the freedoms that they need themselves and to correct those issues that have been observed. The reason why we have multiple observation missions is to ensure that, you know, there is a comparison, you know, taking place between the SADC report and the European Union report, the African Union report, and then they can see that those issues that repeat themselves in all these reports, it's up to the Zimbabwean people. And this is where I appeal to all political leaders, not only in Zimbabwe, especially the elections that are coming in Mozambique, they're coming in South Africa, in DRC. We have to make up our minds that, look, at the end of the day, once the people in the country are given an opportunity to monitor the elections, because they also monitor, it starts not during the day of elections. They must make sure that the constitutional lacunas that can affect a good election are dealt with months before the election. And they must fight to ensure that there's a level playing field. They should never wait for the time when the election is taking place. They must also insist that the electoral commissions and the governments in those countries abide by international norms in holding democratic elections. And this fight must be more vicious before the election comes.
My parting remark tonight is to remind Zimbabweans that we have got MDC CCC opposition, which particularly since the GNU of 2008 to 2013, has been running with the povo, with ordinary people, by day and by night, hunting with the Zanu PF hounds. This is why Zimbabwe has failed to implement reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. While they are vying for the people's vote, the opposition have been very good at reminding us how miserable we are. Fadzayi Mahere is not interested in the fact that Zimbabwe is a failed state, that Zanu PF has turned the country into a North Korea police state. All she cares about is that she remains in the public eye, so that come 2028, she'll participate in the elections, claiming that they will win the elections. They've got now strategies of winning rigged elections. They don't need reforms, no. They can win rigged elections. When all she and her friends are after are those few gravy train seats, particularly in the urban centers, which they know Zanu PF is dangling before them. And if she gets it, she'll take it. She took a gravy train seat last year. She couldn't hang on to it. But that is another matter. The greatest challenge for the people of Zimbabwe is to make sure that 2028, either we have got all the democratic reforms implemented, or we do not participate in the flawed election to give Zanu PF legitimacy. The greatest challenge is to make sure that we do not get conned by the opposition and made to believe they are on our side. They are not. They are only interested in keeping themselves in the public eye, to con us into believing they can win elections. And yet all they are doing is perpetuating Zanu PF dictatorship. We should not give Zanu PF credibility as if to say the last 44 years they've stayed in power because they are smart. They are not. I believe Robert Mugabe is a buffoon. And Mnangagwa is even worse. If they were not buffoons, Zimbabwe will be a thriving nation. Who could inherit a jewel of Africa and within a few decades turn it into a failed state if they were smart? And yet, we've got to admit that we failed to stop Zanu PF rigging elections these last 44 years. Not because Zanu PF leaders are smart, but because we have corrupt and incompetent opposition. We failed to implement reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. We should not fall easily enticed by these opportunists, by these MDC CCC leaders, pretending that they care about us. Can someone please tell them we don't want war? If you had implemented the reforms when you had a golden chance to do so, Zanu PF would be history by now. If you had not participated in a flawed election process last year and taken up the seats, even after SADC said this election process is flawed, at least that would have put pressure on SADC to deny Zanu PF legitimacy. You took up the seats, and now you want to pretend you care about the people suffering. No, you don't. You're only exploiting their ignorance and the fact that they're gullible. That's all you're doing. Thank you very much for listening, and have a good day.